So about 2 years ago, I made these French cleat walls and I really just have not utilized this space quite yet. So in this video, I decided to reorganize this whole area as well as create a bunch of different tool holders for some of the tools that I use the most so that I could get them all hung up on the wall here. I'll show you exactly what tool holders I built and how I built them. I'll also talk about French cleats and why French cleats are such a good storage option for your shop. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. That way you'll always know when we've got a new project that goes live at the Salt City Workshop. But for right now, let's get into the video. So to start off, I just cleared off all of the French cleat wall with all of the old tool hangers. Some of these tool hangers I will repurpose. But for right now, let me explain a little bit about what French cleat is. So just in case you don't know what a French cleat is, it's a piece cut with a 45-degree angle in the middle of it to create two opposing pieces. What you've got is this piece, which is going to be nailed and glued onto the wall with the 45-degree angle facing towards the wall. And then you've got another piece that will go on the back of your tool holder, kind of like on the back of my pen holder. You've got this piece which goes right there, and that 45-degree angle creates pressure and is very, very strong and stable to hold up really anything. You can move it and to wherever you want on the wall using this French cleat option. So the French cleat is a really awesome storage idea for a lot of tools and different things that maybe you'll want to move around and change in the future. As far as why it's called the French cleat, I'm not entirely sure on that.
Dude, come on, French it up.
Now, as you can see, when I was building these French cleats out 2 years ago, I actually left a space here, but I've got some extra pieces of French cleat and I'm gonna go ahead and line them up and show you kind of the process of attaching these to your backer board. So to attach these to the wall, all you need to use is a little bit of wood glue and some pin nails to keep everything in place while the glue dries. The glue is what keeps these things really strong. The most important part is making sure that they are evenly spaced as well as level, because you don't want your tool holders to not be level with each other. It will look really crazy. Luckily, I had some other cleats to make sure that everything was level with. Otherwise, I would just use a spacer and my level to make sure everything is evenly spaced out and level as I attached one of them, and then reference everything off of that one cleat. It's really easy to get in a groove and get these things hung up really quickly. I recommend taking your time just to make sure everything is level and spaced out correctly as you go. The first tool holder that I want to take care of is a tool holder for all of my measuring sticks, like my rulers and my squares. I created this one a long time ago and it really helped during the time, but there's some improvements that I think I could make. For one, I'm going to add some high strength magnets to the section where my squares go. To do this, I just traced out where I was going to put these magnets and then I cut them out with my chisel. It worked pretty well. I just inputted the magnets with some CA glue and some activator. Next, I added some triangular pieces for my carpenter square as well as my speed square. These were hung up, but they kind of got in the way of each other, and so I spaced them out a little bit more correctly and used the CA glue and activator method to attach all of the pieces and make sure that they were thick enough to attach these to the board. It's really nice to have these in a place where I could grab them quickly. That's the reason they get a place up on the wall and not in a drawer. After I added some triangular pieces, I also added some pieces over the top of it that had a bigger lip. These will help to keep the squares from falling off of the wall. I also screwed a couple screws into it to hang my levels as well as my straight edges. And with that, I had the first tool holder complete. Next, I wanted to hang my Salt City Workshop sign in the middle because I feel like this is going to be a little bit more of a set for me and I want it to look nice with my logo. So I decided to just simply add a French cleat onto the back of the sign with some screws just so that I can remove it if I need to. And I put the sign up there. The next tool holder won't be going up on this French cleat wall, but I'll be hanging it in the place where my sign used to be. It's this cabinet that I've been using to hold all of my power tools. I decided to take out this middle shelf because really it just kind of got in the way and there was nothing that I could put on that middle shelf. I also decided to add a couple more of these T-sections to the bottom of the cabinet so that I could hang 2 more tools instead of only the standard 3 that I have for the cabinet. To do this, I used some plywood to measure and make sure that they matched up with the other T's. They're about 3 inches tall and about 3 inches wide. I glued and screwed everything together and then attached them to the cabinet off camera. On the other side of the cabinet, I added a power strip. This is a cool little trick to be able to attach something that has 2 keyholes. You use a strip of painter's tape and just poke where those holes line up. And then attach that tape to the side of the cabinet and screw right where those holes are. And then peel off the tape and you have your screws perfectly lined up for double keyholes. Next, I drilled through the side of the cabinet. This is where the plugs for the chargers will come out and go into the power strip. I then flipped the cabinet to the front and attached the chargers to the back of the cabinet using the same method. I then attached a French cleat to the wall where my sign was and attached the cabinet to the French cleat. And as you can see, it fits perfectly in that little area. After that, I loaded up the whole cabinet with all of my chargers and batteries and tools and toolbox and everything that I could really hold in this area. This area is now all about functionality over looks. Next, I wanted to make some adjustments to a shop towel roll holder that I had. The bar always seemed to slide out, so I decided to cut a couple relief cuts so that the bar could slide down into it, and then it would stop with these triangular pieces on the side and be locked in. I did the exact same with one up on the top as well, where I will hold some wax paper for when I do some glue ups. Next, it was time to make a classic chisel holder. To do this, I just lined up my 6 chisels onto a piece of plywood and measured to make sure I had it all spaced out correctly. I then cut it all down to the right dimensions. The tool holder part is actually only about 3 inches wide, and I spaced the chisels out about 2 inches apart. I then took the piece over to my drill press and drilled the applicable size hole with a Forstner bit. And then took the same piece over to the bandsaw and cut a small gap in each one so that the chisels could just slide in. This is especially useful for the thicker chisels. Instead of finding a way to attach a French cleat to this piece, I decided to cut out my own French cleat, and you can do this with any of your other French cleat tool holders as well. All I did was grab 2 book match pieces and marked a 45-degree angle on it for the French cleat, and then cut it out on the bandsaw. There also needs to be a section that will touch the wall. This will give the whole tool holder support and make sure that it doesn't bounce or bend. After cutting it out, I took it over to the band sander and sanded it all up, and then attached it to the tool holder. But when I was attaching it to the tool holder, I didn't realize that my camera was slowly panning up. So sorry about the poor view, but I just attached it with glue and brad nails. So the next tool holder I want to make is a saw holder for all of my hand saws. I'm repurposing this small tool holder, which used to hold all of my odds and end tools like my screwdrivers and different things like that. I saw this design of a saw holder that uses gravity and pressure to keep the saws from falling out of the tool holder. So I milled down some scrap 2x4s that I had laying around the shop and cut them at 45-degree angles to the right size and right dimensions for this tool holder. I then glued those triangular pieces with wood glue and some CA glue and activator onto the backer board. I made sure that they were spaced out about 1/4 of an inch so that the saws could slide up in between each one of the triangular pieces. I then measured and cut down an inch-thick dowel with my bandsaw and cut 6 pieces to slide in between the gaps of each one of the triangular pieces. After that, I sanded them down and took off the edges to make them slide a little bit easier. Then I placed each one of the dowels into the slots in between the triangular pieces. I then cut some square 1/4-inch plywood to add over the top of the triangular pieces that would hold the dowels in place and prevent them from falling out. So to add the saws to this, you just push up on the saw, and then as the saw pulls down, gravity prevents the saw from falling out as the dowel pinches the saw blade. It's a pretty cool trick, and you can use it in a lot of different applications. After that, I added my chisel holder and chisels to the wall, which turned out pretty awesome. And with that, things are really starting to take shape. Next, I wanted to make a simple mallet holder for a mallet that was given to me by my grandpa. It was made in 1952. To do this, I just used a couple dowels to hold up the mallet and added a French cleat onto the back, and voila. Next, I wanted to make a really nice looking platform holder for all of my hand planes and any hand planes that I will be getting in the future. To do this, I just lined up a piece of plywood and kind of mapped out where I wanted these to go. I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of an accent with some walnut pieces. So I found some scrap walnut and milled it all down to about 1/4 of an inch thick. And then cut them down to about 1.25 inches wide. This will give me about 1/2 of an inch around the outside, creating enough of a lip to hold the hand planes in place. I then attached the border using glue and brad nails around the outside. I left the longer sides a little bit proud so that I could flush trim them up with my Japanese pole saw. After that, I laid out my planes again to make sure I had them mapped out correctly. And then I added a 1/2 inch wide piece of maple in between each hand plane. To attach this, I used some CA glue and activator, using the hand plane as a reference, so that I could make sure that these were snug and weren't going to fall out. Once I was done with one hand plane, I did the exact same thing with the other one. I made sure that they were pretty snug in there and that they weren't going to move around, because this thing is going to be angled and I don't want to have a chance of these nice hand planes falling out of it. Now, I actually realized afterwards that I wanted the planes to be on the left side of the board instead of the right, so I flipped it around. And then I added the two smaller palm planes to the bottom of the board using the same method. I wanted to keep a blank part on the top for some bigger planes when I decide to pick up a few, so that's why there's a big blank spot. So to make these things angled, I cut a couple big angled guests to make sure that they stayed on. This is a method that I use to cut it. I usually use a little bit of double-sided sticky tape and use my crosscut sled to trim those up instead of using anything like a bandsaw and sander. Now to make sure that they measured up, I just put the board up on them and measured the top. I cut a little bit of an angle so that it would match with the board using my miter saw. And then just like I did with the chisel holder, I actually cut my own French cleat on the back using that 45-degree angle and my bandsaw. This way works really well, and I actually wish I would have done this with a lot of my tool holders. I think it looks really awesome to have your own kind of homemade French cleat instead of using a board that's on the back. After that, I drilled a couple pocket holes on the inside of these guests so that they could be attached to the tool holder. And then I attached them to the tool holder using glue and pocket hole screws. And with that, I was able to get my hand planes all hung up here. I'm really happy with the way that this one turned out. It makes it look really awesome. Now the last tool holder I wanted to make was a holder for all of my glue bots and my glue. So I measured a piece of plywood and added some walnut strips around the outside as a ledge so that they wouldn't fall out. It's nice because this matches up with the hand plane tool holder as well. I then added a support piece on the bottom using some brad nails and glue. And then I also added a couple of triangular guests using some CA glue and activator just for support so that the brad nails and glue wouldn't have so much stress on them. At the last moment, I decided to add another tool. I added this hand rotary drill. This thing was given to me by my grandpa, and I would love to have it up on the wall displayed just because it is really awesome and something that he used almost every day to make a living. So I added a couple walnut dowels to the inside at the right spots to allow this thing to hang up. And then I added the French cleat to the back, and this thing was done. Now, like I've mentioned before, my inheritance kind of from my grandpa was this old tool chest when he passed away. It's something that's really dear to me and has a lot of old things that he's used. So I'm going to put this kind of underneath so I have access to it and can pull it out whenever I need it. Other than that, this wall is all complete. I'm really happy with the way that this wall has turned out, especially because it's going to be a set for me in the future, which you guys will get a good view of in videos to come. Well, thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and that there were a lot of things that you learned. I learned a lot from making these tool holders. Again, if you haven't had the opportunity, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. And if you want to see some more shop improvement projects, I've got a whole playlist queued up for you right here. Thanks again for watching, and like I always say, never stop creating.